What a couple of months it's been. If you've taken a look at my YouTube channel in the last couple of months or so, you'd notice it's grown about the same rate it has been for the last couple of years. Contest entry here, really long vlog there. On one hand, the stuff that I had time to put some serious effort into at least signifies I'm improving as a cinematographer, as an editor. I mean, at the end of the day, every bit counts towards my development as a filmmaker. That said, I value quantity almost as much as I do quality. For a while, I was pretty concerned I wouldn't get to apply any of my skill set to anything, as this past semester kicked in after winter break. Then, as luck would have it, my ties to the Rouse Scholars program in HCC would land me some more work as the video guy. I had helped the folks running the program in the past through slideshows and retrospectives, as well as some student projects, and it looked like I was going to be able to do it once more. In part because I wanted to redeem myself for having one of those slideshows to a certain professor just minutes before he needed it. Sorry, Fleisch. I was also recruited to help with another student project, this one of larger scope than anything I had helped with in the past. It was called Rouse Radio, and after sitting in one conversation after another, something that got me a little closer to people who up to that point had only been casual acquaintances, it started to dawn on me that I would miss these people. Very much. After cutting together a solid trailer, it is now my responsibility to get the individual interviews out on an episode-by-episode basis this summer. This will round out my experience at HCC and the Rouse community, thus ending a major chapter in my life. So, what comes next for me? After all, if you're in the 2 years at community college boat, this is the time to start looking at full-throttle universities and settling on a major if you haven't yet. Of course, even having decided in taking an associate's in general education, I'd like to go on record by saying I've known what I wanted to do with the rest of my life for quite some time. This right here is the online paperwork I gotta do to get a transfer to UMBC after this summer. Many of my friends already go there, and a good chunk of people from HCC expect to go there as well. From what I understand, they have some pretty good art programs, especially when it comes to film and graphic design. So it's got that going for it. The deadline is actually the 1st of this coming month. Assuming I decide to go. What I'm about to say has been on my mind for quite a period of time, especially this year. Although I've had similar feelings about the situation here since high school. Here it goes. Now that I've had a significant amount of time to think about what I want out of my life, and what I want out of education, so to speak, I would like to take, at the very least, 1 semester off of college, just as a means of finding myself and getting some things in my life.
No! Most people who take a break from school never go back to school.
Let it out.
End up homeless, without a job,
Let it out.
McDonald's. I don't know how you can not have a job and work at McDonald's at the same time.
Alright, that's enough. Actually got some pretty valid points.
This is ridiculous. This is preposterous. I don't understand why
We're gonna do it this way? This is how it's gonna be? I'm not gonna be...
No!
It's gonna backfire, and it's gonna make them homeless in a couple of years, and it's gonna be tragic.
Okay. For many people, some might say too many people, the very idea of what I just said is considered some kind of social suicide. Like, not only is it delusional to think such a thing, but it's also insulting to think such a thing. To even consider straying from a path as sacred as higher education and the college experience, that all-powerful 4-year experience, more if you're in a certain major, full of nothing but emotional, educational growth and personal enrichment. Never mind the unprecedented amount of pressure that could turn even the most upstanding citizen into a complete and utter fucktard, be it from their desire to be accepted by their oh-so-esteemed peers, or just the sheer amount of work that's expected to be done by them in multiple classes, or the debt. Don't even get me started on that. That pisses me off. I'm not even paying for it. Again, I'm not paying for that. I'm admitting that outright. Nor do I expect anyone to pay off a long-term debt once I'm done with all this crap. I apologize if I'm coming off a little strong in saying all of this, but it is very, very frustrating that there are so many people out there who, the minute they hear anything like this, they reject it, regardless of what the person might have to say in their defense. This is by no means a popular view. I'm willing to accept that. I'm open to the idea of getting backlash for it. That said, last time I checked, this is America, where any adult, no matter how socially inept or inexperienced, this guy right here, can voice an opinion as long as they back up their views with reason and critical thinking. Both of those things, by the way, I learned in over 12 years of school, a place where I'm apparently learning stuff that I'm going to apply to day-to-day life. That was part of the contract, yeah? So without further delay and without raising my blood pressure any more than necessary, let me explain myself. Now, before I go into the finer details of my position here, I'd like to lay any preconceived ideas of taking a break to rest, at least in terms of its relationship with me as an individual case, and not some general consensus or percentage on some graph somewhere. Taking a semester off is an option that I've heard since high school. People who are anxious enough about applying to college and going to college and committing to that 4-year program, who were nervous enough about it to post about it on Facebook, were met with a couple of answers from their, older friends who suggested taking a break, taking a semester off, or maybe even a year, more, who knows, it depends on the person. And this period can be used to really decide what someone wants to do with the rest of their life. Like, a lot of people don't have that set in their head. Not everyone knows that kind of thing right away, and that some people need some time off in order to really find themselves and define what they want out of their life. So really, while I'm aware that there's some, scary percentage of people who, once they take a break, never actually go back to school and totally ruin everything, I refuse to look at such a number as a rule or a destiny that will befall anyone who takes that route. I mean, if history has taught me anything, I am by no means a statistical person. Plus, having talked about this prospect with some of my peers recently, which has ranged from students who themselves took a break, or siblings of someone who did take a break, even faculty and staff who have experience in seeing people leave and then come back, or maybe their kids have to forego something in order to pursue something that they're more passionate about. I can say with full confidence that if this little route that I'm imagining for myself goes south, goes sour, I can go back to school. It doesn't just suddenly disappear because I didn't keep at it at the same rate as most people do. And yet, in talking about moving away from the college scene, I find it important to just sum up how I feel about higher education, college in general, college as a whole. In a phrase, it's flawed. I'm not a big fan of how this country obsesses over getting a diploma, getting that bachelor's or that master's in some field. Aside from the undeniable fact that not every field requires a doctor's or a bachelor's in order to succeed and find financial stability, there's a few other things worth bringing up here. The costs are high, especially if you plan on getting that degree at some prestigious, esteemed university. The social experience is a contradictory mishmash of young adult stupidity and the pious self-righteousness of a bunch of stuffed shirts who, at the end of the day, are trying to crank out productive, yet obedient, members of society in an efficient, profitable manner. The cherry on top of this little sundae of fun is that if you genuinely want that educational growth, if you really want to take that next step in growing as a person, but don't want to put up with all that bullshit, there's community college. A slick, affordable, unfluffed, to-the-point experience, which surprisingly gets the job done, and people could make the argument that it gets more done, because by not having to put up with all that extra crap, you get more in touch with why you're there in the first place, and that's to learn. And if you look in the right places, if you find some kind of honor society like I did, it can be just as rich of an experience as a fraternity or a maternity or whatever the hell people are trying to get into left and right these days. Being a Rouse Scholar just made it that much better. It made it so much easier to tolerate the classroom setting, knowing that there's a community, almost, I'm gonna sound corny, almost a family of people who you could always rely on to talk to help you through hard times in your life, or to just have open intellectual discussion with. Plus, besides that, if you know the right people on campus, you can actually set up some connections that, most people would say, oh, once you go to film school or once you get this degree, you'll meet the right people, but you gotta do it at this big high-end university to meet those people. No, that's not true. People are people. We are all one large social network. Look, I've played 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, alright? Or is it 6? Crap. My point is, everyone knows somebody, and you just gotta meet them at your community college, and you're set. Kind of. That derailed. Whoa, Questa, those are some pretty drastic things to say out of the blue like you're doing. What could have possibly sprung out of the ground and made you hate school so much? Here's the thing. I wouldn't be saying these things unless I had a firm grasp on the moral, applicational, and sociological workings of college, of our educational system. As I've said, I've been hesitant to throw myself into the world of college from the get-go, from high school. And while I can honestly say I'm glad that I got a lot of the experiences I had in these first 2 years of college, my time at HCC is far from 100% justification to keep going on the traditional path. Especially now that even if I were to continue this little journey straight away like everyone else does, I'm honestly not sure what my major should be anymore. Seeing as film programs are so much more expensive and they require a bunch of art prereqs that I might not even have, meaning I could very well end up doing another 2 or 3 semesters of artistic catch-up in the art department before I even take 1 production class. Even with the money I'd saved by going to community college these first 2 years, I might end up in debt. Plus all of the non-art degrees that I'm remotely interested in, you know, like sociology and philosophy, those will only do me good if I plan on teaching. I don't. Or if I use their teachings of human interaction in some mode of business. That's not happening. Then there's the fact that if you wanted a job in something like, I don't know, filmmaking, even the most esteemed schools don't always guarantee you a job. I know this because having talked to several experienced, seasoned veterans of the filmmaking industry, I've come to the conclusion that not only is film school more expensive than most other fields, it might not even be necessary for you as a person. You could just as easily teach yourself a lot of the fundamentals of filmmaking. Not just filmmaking, like the production and the distribution and getting it out there. You can teach yourself all of that. The internet is a wonderful, wonderful resource. There's all kinds of books. I mean, just in terms of becoming a filmmaker, the resources outside of school are infinitely higher. As for why I wouldn't even consider a position in some kind of business firm, let's just say that if any of those places hired me, I guarantee you one of their structures would burn to the ground within a day. You ever seen Postal? Yeah, it wouldn't be pretty. Now I've gone on long enough of how I feel about it. Now if you want to know where these little nuggets of wisdom came from in the first place, I'm going to give you a couple of video links. I'll just put them right there for you. The first is a pretty popular TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson about the educational system. And it's been converted into a whiteboard, and we know how popular those are with the business-minded as of late. Oh, and I'd like to mention that that first video, yeah, I was introduced to it by sociology class. Let that sink in. It's kind of funny that the very institution that's supposed to be taking your money is also educating you on how you shouldn't even be playing into the system, but, you know, only people like me can get a little chuckle out of something like that. I'm a little asshole. Then there's an interesting piece on the sociological flaws of going to college by Marty Nemko. Mr. Nemko has been evaluating the system for quite a few years, and he talks from the point of view of a student and from the point of view of an educator. You know, a nice balanced perspective. And those are gone. Check them out later if you didn't already. And just so we can satisfy the people who like their contextual research and writing, there's also a couple of articles down below, so check out the description if you want to read up on that. I don't mean to turn this into a flat-out college or no college debate. I'll leave that for the cats up top to sort out for themselves. Instead, let's talk about how I, an aspiring filmmaker, would look at all this on a simple basis of self-worth and personal desire. Rather than regurgitating the methods through which an artist can find himself and form a respectable level of visual and thematic literacy, I will instead refer you to the stories of people who experience the same kind of quandary at some point in their lives. Now, if you've only got the time or patience for one, I strongly recommend the piece by Richard Linklater, who started off making independent darlings like Slacker, and would of course go on to make bigger films like School of Rock and Me and Orson Welles. He's very honest about what it felt like to be at this kind of crossroads, and it lines up with a lot of the feelings I currently have, and many other people for that matter. So, all of this in mind, should Dylan be granted his 6-month experiment of inward evaluation and the weighing of alternative paths, what, pray tell, would he do with all that extra time? I actually hesitate to use the word break because that word's too often associated with loafing around and sleeping till noon, both of which I'm pretty good at, don't get me wrong. I could major in that if I wanted to. Should I in the end be blessed with this period of time that I so desperately want and need, I assure everyone watching this right now that this experiment in terms of productivity and personal expansion would be anything but a break. First off, I would start exercising. Yeah, me. Despite the slumps of being a student, I have miraculously avoided the freshman 15, and I'm not necessarily the tote bag of bone and skin that I thought I was going to be without that inward drive to exert force on a regular basis. That being said, I am a man of 20, soon to be 21. I am still in my prime. I did not take advantage of the time that could be used for creating a system of fitness. That'd be a gross misuse of my time. By adding a small regimen to my weekly routine, which would include morning runs, some basic weight work, maybe even a little half-assed yoga, I would optimize my physical and mental focus, which would make things a lot easier in the course of my day.
Let me just pull back and let's really try to outline what my ambitions are at this stage in my life.
The big dream is to one day be in a position where I can make a living through telling stories and entertaining a large audience and giving back to the creative medium that has provided so much for me over the years. But, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna have a top-billed, top-of-the-box office hit in the next couple of years or anything. I mean, you know, lightning always strikes in a bottle somewhere, but it's not wise to assume that's going to be you. What would my short-term goals be then? Well, it's basically the same thing, just like, you know, not necessarily, you know, on something that large of a scale. It would just be like a microcosm of that experience. But as far as getting closer to that dream, you know, I just think a few months to try out my different options, see what works for me, see what doesn't work for me, could really be beneficial, because, not to like sound too overly dependent, but I am a kid who's living with his parents until, you know, he's done with these first transitionary years. Transitionary, I don't know, either of those could be a word. So like, while I'm getting a bunch of new responsibilities, as I should, because no one should ever stay a kid to the point where they're living with their parents for the rest of their lives. But, you know, I'm expected to be more mature, I'm expected to, you know, start working towards self-dependence, but I'm still dependent to the point of having a bed, having a place to stay, which does cost a lot of money if you are trying to do that yourself. I'm not in a position where I can do that yet. But if I were to take advantage of the free time and the liberty of living with someone who cares about me enough to give me food and bed and a roof over my head, I could make a really fucking brilliant poem out of that, but, you know, that's besides the point. Then I could make it so that should the time come that I can do that myself, not only will I have the money and have the security, but, you know, I'll have enough to, like, make a pretty decent existence for myself. If I were to unleash my inner entrepreneur, which all of us have, it's just a matter of how obnoxious and outgoing it is that determines whether or not people do enough with it to make a living for themselves. I mean, but should I get enough experience as a self-employed, self-motivated person, you know, I just feel like the benefits would be great. Because as soon as I leave the nest, I would have something to fall back on. Without the debt, without the years of pulling hair out of my head. I'd say that from about age 10 on, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I idolized George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and like a couple of others, and just kind of assumed that, okay, if I stay super interested in this and just keep making my dumb little Lego movies, I'll eventually make the next Star Wars or something. I mean, everyone thinks that at first, but like, I don't know. It doesn't always pan out that way, I don't think. And I've always had the drive to create. Like, even before the movie thing, it was comic books and, you know, video games that captivated my imagination. Like, they just blew my mind. Me and my friends would create things that we thought were really funny and would be proud of once we finished them, you know, because that was our stuff. We took nothing and turned it into something. And I've lost that thrill over the years. And it would be really tragic if I just lost that. That's all I'm trying to say. Because without that, I don't think I'm gonna amount to much.
Okay, we're not crying, Dylan. Let's work on that, too. No more being a little bitch just because you're getting a little emotional. Let's sum up what I'm saying. Not creating stuff has left me a little depressed, which isn't good for anybody. I could take the opportunity that I have as someone living at home to just take some time off, really take some time to discover myself as not a student, but as a person, and hopefully someone who makes art. I really don't like school. A perfect world would be me never having to go back and making things work out for myself, which, believe me, I understand isn't easy either. I think this is just a matter of which one's for me, which heavy workload am I willing to put up with. And mine just happens to not involve a classroom. It's more about forcing myself to survive with my craft, taking the time to enrich myself through reading. I miss reading. I miss music. I miss filmmaking. I miss all of it. And maybe through this break, I'll get closer to not only getting those things back into the forefront of my life, but making them my means of living. Thank you for listening.